welcome to today's session. So today we are going to continue our chapter number 3. Remember, in last session we discussed our chapter number 3, audit planning, strategy, execution, wherein we understood the difference between the audit, overall audit strategy, audit plan. Then we understood the audit program. Then we understood the detailed plan that we prepared, the benefits of the plan, and then we went and ahead and discussed one essay, that is essay 600. In last lecture we discussed essay 600. Over there we understood, okay, what are the things that we are required to do when we are relying upon the work of other auditor. Remember in last session, then we discussed the disclosure parts of essay 600, like what are the things we are required to disclose in our audit report when we are relying the work of other auditor. And then we understood the responsibility of being principal auditor in case of when we are using the work of another auditor. So this what we discussed in the last session till now. Any doubt with respect to this particular part? Any doubt? Okay, if no doubt, what I suggest is let's take some questions on this particular topic and then we can proceed ahead. Okay, we will take up then a new essay and then we'll discuss the chapter number 3 in further more detail. So let me share my screen and let's discuss some questions on this particular topic. Very good question, I would say. So the question is basically Super Products Limited, a listed entity, invested 500 crores on 1/4/2022 in Tricycle Technology Limited and acquired 35% equity through superior voting rights, equity shares, and right to appoint the majority of the board of directors, including nominee directors. Okay. Under the investment agreement, TTL, that is the Tricycle Technologies Limited, agreed to pay 30.5 CR every year plus the 65% of the dividend declared each year. TTL agreed that this Super Products Limited, that's the SPL, would take all the decisions about the manufacturing, marketing, selling of the new and existing products, either already developed or developed to the patent technology provided by the SPL. SPL appointed Sudha and Associates as their statutory auditor for financial year 22-23. TTL appointed Shubham and Company as their statutory auditors. Sudha and Associates issued guidance to Shubham and Company on how they will use the work that will be performed by them. However, TTL's management was of the view that they are not required to share anything with the Sudha and Associates. Also, TTL is a separate standalone entity where the majority of the holding is with old individual shareholders. Hence, Shubham and Company is not required to disclose any information to Sudha and Associates. Now, okay, we will go to the next part, but till now, tell me what is your understanding when it comes to the assertion of the TTL, that is the Shubham and Company is not required to disclose or share any information with Sudha and Associates. Do you think the management of TTL is correct? Question number 1 about the management of TTL. Or basically this question, that as a parent auditor, Sudha and Associate decided to visit TTL to examine certain key transactions pertaining to the deal between SPL and TTL. However, TTL's management denied and explained to Sudha and Associate that they are not the principal auditor. Kindly guide TTL with respect to Sudha and Associate being principal auditor, or you tell me what is the appropriate answer over here, whether TTL's management is correct or they are wrong. If they are wrong, then why? This is the question. So you need to answer whether the TTL's management, that is, they are saying that Sudha and Associates are not the principal auditor, they are not required, or they are not required to share anything with them, is correct or not? Come on guys, I'll give you 2 minutes, read the question again, okay, and then answer. Come on guys, quickly. Anyone would like to answer this question? Anyone would like to answer this question? Okay. Now, no one? Okay. So, if, yes.
Sir, I think here the SPL, excuse me, sir.
Yes.
In this question, the SPL is a associate company of TTL as it acquires 20% or more share capital, and here they TTL agree that SPL will take all the decision regarding manufacturing, marketing, and selling, so that the controlling part is with the SPL. So SPL will be the whole controlling entity, and so that the auditor of the SPL can be the principal auditor. So the TTL is required to provide information to the SPL's auditor, which is Sudha and Associate.
Absolutely correct. Very good. See, understand first thing here, we are talking about the control. Here, TTL has, if you see, SPL has invested 500 crores in TTL, that is 35% equity, but they have the superior voting right to appoint majority of the board of directors, including nominee directors, right to get more than 50% of the surplus, that profits. So they are getting 65% of the dividend each year. SPL would take all the decisions regarding manufacturing, marketing and selling, and that demonstrate that they have the control in this particular scenario. Now if they have the control, they become the holding, and based on that, Sudha and Associates are required to opine on the consolidated financial statement. Resting, we will assume that all are there, like it's not an investment entity or XYZ. Now, if Sudha and Associate becomes the principal auditor, then they are required to use the work of another auditor, that is Shubham and Company. Okay, so that they can issue opinion on the consolidated financial statement. They have issued the guidance to Shubham and Company. That is absolutely correct. However, the management of the TTL is saying that they are separate standalone entity, which is incorrect. They are subsidiary and the holding is Super Products Limited. And as a result, Shubham and Company, the auditor of the subsidiary company, is required to provide information to the principal auditor. Now, here the management of TTL's management contention is incorrect because SPL is a holding and Sudha and Associates are principal auditor. Clear with this? Any doubt with this particular part? Okay. Now the second question is that kindly explain to Sudha and Associates the matter to consider before their own participation is sufficient to be act as a principal auditor. You need to tell me the factors that the Sudha and Associate should consider before they can finalize that their own participation is sufficient as a principal auditor. We have discussed this one. Come on, guys. So, which are
should consider the level of the materiality level of the
yes,
of
yes, you
the
are going ahead.
uh, firstly the materiality level, and secondly the degree of knowledge of the in the other auditor, and risk of material misstatement, whether any risk is related to the information, and the fourth one is the performance of the policies and procedure adopted by the other auditor in the audit of the financial statement.
Yes, very good. Good. Anyone else would like to add something more or has a different answer? Think from the point of view that you are a Sudayan Associates, you are going to be the principal auditor. What factors you will consider first before accepting the work of a principal auditor? Remember, we discussed that in the previous session also. So, as a principal auditor, I am required to consider four important and major things. Number one, I would consider the materiality of the portion that I am auditing. Okay, as a principal auditor, what I am auditing, whether that is material or not, or how much material it is. Number two, my knowledge as a principal auditor regarding the business of the component and the group. Third, the risk of material misstatement in the financial information that is being audited by the component auditors or the other auditors. Means how much of the risk is lying outside the financial statement which is I am auditing. Fourth, the performance of additional procedures. Okay, these are the four factors that are there that a auditor as a principal auditor is required to understand or required to consider before they can accept their position as a principal auditor. Clear? Yep. Okay. Now, third question. SPL specifically requested Sudan Associates to verify their credentials of Subhaman Company, professional competency and objectivity of Subhaman Company before using any of their work. So SPL requires that the Sudan Company should verify credential, professional competency and objectivity of Subhaman Company before using their work. Sudan Associate, however, are not sure whether they should perform such procedures or not. Kindly guide Sudan Associate with respect to considering the professional competency of other auditors. So, tell me what is the requirement with respect to the principal auditor's responsibility of evaluating professional competency, objectivity of other auditors. Come on, guys. What is the requirement for principal auditor? Okay, when they are required to verify the professional competency, objectivity of other auditors. Yes, Hemant, very good. Anyone else? We have discussed this part also yesterday. Oh, in the last session, I mean to say. Come on, guys.
Sir,
Yes.
he would assess first whether the other auditor is a professional member of our institute. And if he is the member of institute, we are not required to detail check his professional competence and skills. But if he is not our member, then we will check from which body or which institute he is holding this experience, and under which standards he is applying his procedures for auditing that component.
Very good. Absolutely correct. Yes. So I would first verify as a principal auditor that whether the other auditor is the member of institute or not. If he is the member of institute, I am not required to consider the professional competency of the member of institute. But if he is not, then I am required to perform such procedures that can give me assurance regarding the professional competency, objectivity of the other auditor. Here in this case, if other auditor Shubham & Company is a member of institute, I am not required to verify the professional competency and the objectivity. If they are not, then only I am required to verify. Clear? Any doubt with this? Now comes the very interesting part. Question number 4. Assuming TTL is located and incorporated as per the prevailing laws in Netherlands, and Shubham & Company are not member of institute, rather they are qualified to be auditors of TTL as per the local laws of the Netherlands. In such a case, kindly guide Sudha and Associate with respect to the matters that they may consider in determining whether the component auditors have appropriate competency, capability to perform assigned audit procedures at the component or not. Now, they are not at the member of institute, but they are incorporated, or they are the auditors to qualified to be auditors outside India, in Netherlands. Now, what audit procedures you will perform?
In this case also, we will see whether as per the applicable laws of that area, foreign country, or the land where it is situated, the person who is auditing that component, whether he is permitted to perform that audit procedure. That is, we will also consider the qualification, whether it is allowed under their laws.
Yep. Good. Very good. Anyone else would like to add something more? Anyone? See, in this scenario, what we are required to check, number one, when I talk about professional competency, I need to understand the experience, the knowledge of the component auditor. Number two, what specialized skills like industry specific knowledge they have. Number three, which standards they are following. Number four, I would understand whether they are independent, like they are following any code of ethics, or they are objective based on the code of ethics or not. Number five, what kind of assurance they are issuing and what kind of opinion they have issued on the report. Okay, I will understand the work performed by them, including in their report we usually mention like auditor's responsibility. So from there also I can get an understanding what was their responsibility, basic understanding, the laws and regulations or the legal system under which the report has been issued. Okay, professional oversight, professional principles that they have followed, okay, and some other standards that might be applicable to the audit that they have performed. I will understand all these factors, and on the basis of that I will decide the competency and objectivity of the auditor which is not a member of institute. This is an suggestive answer that these steps can be followed. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt? Okay. One good question on the similar lines we have in continuation that assuming the TTL's Netherlands Incorporated Company old individual shareholders, like the old shareholders of the TTL, restrict Shubham and Company from sharing any information or performing any procedures suggested by Sudha and Associates, such that Sudha and Associates should not be able to gather any financial information of TTL. Sudha and Associates has approached you to understand how to deal with such limitations on audit scope when limitations will have material and pervasive effect on the expression of the opinion on the financial statement of SPL. Kindly guide Sudha and Associates. So what do you think Sudha and Associates should do when they are not able to get sufficient and appropriate information?
Sir, in this case, Sudha and associate, whether if it is possible, go to and visit, and if it cannot, as it is a foreign place, then it is unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence or information from the TTL's audit, Subham and Company. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead. You are correct. Yes.
Then it can it is material and pervasive effect on the expression of opinion. It can issue the disclaimer of opinion in the audit report, and also it can refer in the other matter paragraph also regarding the unableness of the receiving audit evidence.
Okay, good, very good. Anyone else would like to add something more? Anyone else? No? Okay. So, when we talk about basically responsibility of the principal auditor, okay, now in that case, SC 600 says that the principal auditor should perform procedures to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence that the work of other auditor is adequate. Now, if here when principal auditor is not able to get sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, okay, in that case he has to perform some procedures, he has to perform other procedures, okay, to get sufficient and appropriate audit evidence that the information that is provided by the TTL is correct or not. Now here there is no information, there is a limitation on the scope of audit, okay. So either Sudha and Associates can go at the TTS location, they can speak to the management of the TTL, they can speak them with them, and they can perform some procedures. If that is not possible, if that is not happening due to the limitation implemented by the TTL's management, in that case they can evaluate the impact on the audit opinion. Now here the effect is material and pervasive, means this is not a small qualification, that would be a major impact. As a result, what they should do is Either they should withdraw from the audit wherever practicable and possible under the law, because in some cases you will not be able to withdraw from the audit. Okay, if withdrawal is not possible or is not feasible, in that case, if you are not able to obtain sufficient and appropriate audit evidence which has a material and pervasive effect, you should issue a disclaimer of opinion that because of such and such things, we are not able to get information, we are not able to comment on the this particular area. Also state in the basis for the disclaimer of the opinion section that auditor was not able to obtain the basis of the basically disclaimer of opinion, and accordingly revise or amend the other matter paragraph where we say that these financial statements have been audited by so and so auditor and we have received and we have relied upon the same. Amend that paragraph and specify that you did not receive financial information of this company which is material, and as a result we have expressed a qualified or disclaimer of opinion. You can refer back to the basis of disclaimer of opinion in that paragraph. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Rini. Any doubt till now with respect to this one, this question? Any doubt? Okay, if no doubt, then shall we proceed to the next topic that I want to discuss for today? Okay, so the next topic that I would be starting up is SA 610, using the work of internal auditors. Okay, which is there if you see your study material, that is page number 3.24. okay, you have a SA 610 using the work of internal auditors. Okay, now before we go and perform a deep dive, can someone tell me when this standard is applicable, when we are required to follow this particular standard? Come on guys. When we are required to follow this standard?
Sir, sorry to say that, but due to my technical lag, I missed this 2 to 3 minute session. I will not asking for you to repeat everything. I'm just asked which standard are you talking about?
No issues. So right now we completed our previous question. So the question on the SA 600 part. Now I have started the SA 610 using the work of internal auditor. Over there my question is when this standard is required to be followed, or when we are required to use this particular standard.
Okay, I would like to say something on this. If during the auditor wants to use the work of internal auditor, let's say while at the planning stage also he can use that for risk assessment related issues. If we want to discuss with that internal auditor to get understanding of the entity's internal control system, he can have interaction with internal auditors. He will use that interaction right from the starting of the planning stage, and during the audit also he can decide to use his work. And this standard can talk about in 2 different cases where he can use internal auditors work directly, or he can use that word as assistance from that internal auditor.
Okay, very good, yes. Anyone else would like to add something more to this? Yes, Hemant, very good, correct. Okay, so as absolutely correct pointed out that when we are using the work of internal auditor, and when I say work of internal auditor means whatever testing, whatever analysis, whatever risk assessment they have performed in the organization, if we want to use that for the purpose of our audit, in that case, I would be using this standard. I would follow the steps, the requirements which are mentioned in this standard. Okay, so I would look into the things that how the internal audit team or function of the organization has performed, and based on that I would use their work. But tell me, why to use their work? Why someone would like to use their work?
The time restrictions, as in the statutory auditor will not be able to look into each and every aspect. So he may take.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely correct. So, see, now, whether internal auditors are independent, whether their working was objective, that's another story that we will understand now. But internal auditors are also a line of defense in an organization. Okay, we will see in a chapter upon the internal auditors what their role and responsibility are. But internal auditors have similar loans as the external auditors, although the difference between them is we are external, we are appointed by the appointed as per laws and regulations. They are internal, they can be part of the corporate or organization, they can be employees, but their role is similar. As a line of defense, they are required to perform risk assessment, they are required to perform issues, observations, whether the financial controls are working effectively or not, whether they are designed effectively or not. So there are roles and responsibilities of the internal auditor, and some of the roles and responsibilities are overlapping. For example, they are similar than what we do as external auditors. As a result, if someone has performed some work which is similar to my work, I can use their work. Okay, that will save my time, that will save provide efficiency under the audit. Okay, but subject to certain conditions, and that is we need to understand. Now, by performing the work, we need to first understand, or by relying upon the work, we need to first understand that, okay, this is my objective when I'm relying the work of internal auditor. The objective of the external auditor. Now, the objective of the external auditor here is to understand whether the work, okay, that is being performed by the internal auditor is appropriate or not, or whether I can use it or not. Now, internal audit can help you in two ways. One, you can use the work that has been already done by the internal auditor. Second, you can ask internal auditor to test on your instructions, which is known as a direct assistance method, where they work under your supervision, under your direction, and you review their work. First one, I directly use whatever work they have performed by following some procedures. Second, I say them what to do, how to do, and I will review at the end. So these are the two methods that are through which I can use the work of internal auditor. Okay, so now not only at the audit evidence stage or at the audit execution stage I can use the work of internal auditor, but I can use the work of internal auditor at all the stages, start from the planning. Okay, and that's why my objective is to determine whether the internal audit function and their work, or whether the direct assistance can be used in which areas basically, and to what extent. Okay, so if I write objective of external auditor, I would recommend everyone to take notes with me, because these notes will help you in last day of exam in quick revision. You need to take the notes in your own format. No need to maintain the same format, but something that you can revisit a day before exam and you can remember the topic easily. Okay, so it's important you take your notes, and trust me, that will really help you. Objectives auditor. Now, the objectives of the external auditor, basically, where I am using the work of internal auditor to reduce the extent of the audit procedures that I am going to perform, or to modify the nature, timing and extent of the audit procedures that I am going to perform, is, first of all, I need to determine whether the work of internal auditors, I would write IA, but in exam, do not use abbreviations, write the full form or write the full word. Okay. Whether the work of internal auditor, okay, or their direct assistants from or their direct assistants can be used. Okay, and if so, then in which area and to what extent? Now, this is a very important part. Which area, what extent, we will understand in detail, because that is the base that we need to understand. To what extent and which areas we can use the work of internal audit, and in which areas it is not permitted to use the work of internal audit. Number two, that we are required to understand whether if we are using the work of internal auditor, if using work of internal auditor, in that case, whether the work is adequate. Whether the work is adequate. The way we do it for the audit evidence, that whether the audit evidence is sufficient and appropriate, the way we checked in the case of component auditor, whether the procedures performed by the component auditor are adequate for the purpose of principal auditor, same way over here we will check that whether the work that is performed by the internal auditors is adequate for the purpose of external auditor or not. Okay, so for external auditors, if using work of internal auditors, whether the work is adequate or not. And the last one is if we are using direct assistance mode. Okay, if direct assistance is obtained, then we need to appropriately direct, supervise and review their work. Okay, so the objective of the auditor is to direct, supervise and review the work. Okay, so these are the three important parts under which we will understand this particular standard, and these are the base, kind of a base that that we need to discuss. Now the first part, that is to which extent, or in in which area we need to use the work of internal auditors. Now you tell me, how will you decide in which area or to what extent you will be using the work of internal auditor? If you want to use, then how will you decide that? Come on, guys. How will you decide to what extent I will use the work of internal auditor?
Sir,
Yes.
we will look into the objectivity of that internal auditor, the way he is performing his internal audit function, his competence we will also check, and the approach, whether it is systematically following the internal audit function. If it is satisfying, then we can decide whether we can use its work. Like we can use his work in testing, other performing of audit procedures which we can include in our audit process, and which are similar to his work also. We can use his judgments for arriving our audit evidence. We can use his observations and judgments, and the knowledge of his total system of the transaction processing at the entity.
Very good. Yes.
Means we
Good.
can decide the nature, extent, and timing of our audit procedures, whether we are required to perform any other things that have been already performed by the internal auditor himself.
Okay. Good. Yes. Yes, Hemant. I would answer this in a minute. Very good, Ginny. Yes. Anyone else would like to answer this? Anyone else?
Where
Okay.
the auditor feel materiality is little low and he can depend, so that if it is material, he personally wants to check through. Where it is not so material, and he can use the assistance of internal auditor.
Yes. Yes. Good. Very good. Okay. So, when we are required to use the work of internal auditor to save the time, okay, now we need to understand to what extent and which areas. Before we jump to the area and the extent, we need to first understand. We need to first understand the whether the internal auditor or the internal audit function which is there in the organization is performing the work which is sufficient or not. Means sufficient in the sense not adequate one that we are going to discuss later on. Sufficient in the sense whether they have such kind of objectivity, whether they are following policies and procedures, whether they are that kind of competent enough to perform the work. See, in order to use their work, first I need to understand that whether they are that much competent enough to perform the work, then only I will rely upon their work. And once I will start relying, okay, let's say for example, internal auditors are there. There is one particular company which is having very complex revenue recognition process. Now it is a very complex, okay. For example, airlines. So revenue recognition from the, let's say, usage of air miles when you apply discount or something like that, when the tickets are booked through Make My Trip. So let's say there is international airline company, okay. Now they are registered with various travel agents. They are registered with a lot of other portals also. They get revenue from there based on XYZ calculations and everything. Now, when I want to rely upon the work of internal auditor, first I need to understand whether they are competent or whether they have that much knowledge about the complex revenue recognition process of the company, so that I can think, okay, I need to rely upon the work, or I need to rely upon their work in the revenue recognition area. If I find that they are not that much competent enough, I may decide to rely on the simple areas which I have a comfort on that, okay, they might have done appropriately. For example, simple, let's say review of expenses, that is very pretty much simple, or review of some, you can say professional or legal charges, or review of rent expenses, something like that, where I can see, okay, perfectly fine. It is not a complex area that doesn't require, detailed understanding or industry specific knowledge. I can rely upon the work of internal auditor. But if it's a very complex area, then I need to, think whether they are that much competent, whether they have such kind of information knowledge that I can rely upon whatever work they have performed. And from there, we need to evaluate the internal audit function first. I need to evaluate the internal audit function, and I will be doing by understanding three important things. Number one, organizational status, relevant policies and procedures that support the objectivity of the internal auditor. I'll explain that. Number two, the competency of the internal audit function. And number three, the systematic and disciplined approach that they have followed. Okay, so these three things I will verify, and then only I will decide whether to use the work of internal auditor or not. Clear? Clear with these three requirements? Before I can rely, I will evaluate the internal audit function. Okay, evaluate the internal audit function, and based on this evaluation, I will decide whether to rely upon the work of internal auditor or not. Now, when I talk about organizational status, relevant policies, procedures support the objectivity of internal auditor, can anyone give me example of this? What I will verify in this? Organizational status, relevant policies, procedures, and how they can support the objectivity of internal auditor. What I'm required to check in this? Anyone?
Appointment of internal auditor, when he is appointing, under which conditions they are appointed, management and their interaction with the management, and overall objectivity or independence.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Anyone? So, what I'm talking about is that to what extent internal audit functions, organizational status and relevant policies support its objectivity. What I will verify in this? How I will verify objectivity of the internal auditor. Let's forget the relevant policies and procedures, organizational status. How will I verify the objectivity of the internal auditor?
Internal audit report, sir.
Okay. Good. Anyone else? Okay, tell me. I will go to the basic level. What is objectivity?
The unbiased. Being
Very good.
unbiased
Yes.
did not become under the undue influence, right?
Correct. Absolutely correct. Yes. Very good, Vignesh. So now I'm talking about ability to perform the task without allowing biasness, conflict of interest, or undue pressure or influence. Okay, that can override the professional judgment. That is objectivity I'm talking about over here. Now tell me, how will I verify the objectivity of internal auditor?
By communicating to the internal auditor, we can
Okay, no, go ahead.
And by reading the audit report that he has prepared, and also by if external auditor thinks if it is required, he can also do a sufficient audit procedure on the any areas in which he feels requirement.
Yes. Okay, good.
Independence of the auditor, sir. Who appointed him? Or is there any relationship between the internal auditor and the management?
Okay. Okay. Anything else? Anyone else would like to add something further to this? No? Okay, I'll explain. So when I talk about understanding the objectivity of the internal auditor, means ability to perform the task without getting influenced. Now see, understand one thing, internal auditors in most of the cases, when I talk about internal audit function, they are the employees of the company. In some cases there could be external company also, external firm also, but in the most of the cases they are the employees of the company. Now being an employee of the company, it is very difficult for me to say that yes, employer will not apply undue pressure or will not influence the decision of the employee. That can be possible but for that there has to be something which is known as a organizational status alignment. What that means is to whom internal audit is reporting. Simple stuff. For example, I'll give you an example. I will show an example of an organizational status, policies and procedures. One side where there is a conflict of interest, where it doesn't support the objectivity. On the other side, it's supposed. So let's say, org status. Now you have a CEO or let's say managing director. Then you have other CEOs like CFO. Then you have CPO, Chief Procurement Officer, CTO, Chief Technology Officer, Chief Human Resource Officer of the company, CHRO, and all that stuff. Okay. Below CFO, you have Chief Internal Audit Executive or Chief Internal Auditor, basically, or the internal audit function setting. Okay. Now, if CFO is the one who is guiding or to whom internal audit is reporting, okay, in that case, can I say this is objective? The organizational structure is objective enough, or it preserves the objectivity of internal auditor? Yes or no? Do you think in this scenario the organizational structure supports the objectivity? Good, Anila? Yes, Eamon? Okay, now let's say there is an audit committee, or you can say those charged with governance. Okay, I will write for the simplicity purpose audit committee. Instead of reporting to CFO, internal audit function is reporting to audit committee, not to the CFO. Now tell me the difference.
Sir, in case of audit committee, it will be more proper, or we will say that the organizational structure supports the internal audit function objectivity.
Absolutely correct. Yes. So when internal audit is reporting to CFO, they are less objective. Here it is less objective, or supports lesser to the objectivity, and here supports more. So this way, the organizational status can also play an important role to understand how internal auditors are there, how they are placed. Okay. Second, when I talk about policies and procedures, okay, let's say there is a policy. I will give you a good example. So there is a policy that requires to perform year-end calculation year-end calculations, okay, that requires internal audit to perform year-end calculations. Let's assume this way. That requires internal audit to perform year-end calculations for preparation of financial statements. Now this is the policy. Now tell me whether this policy supports objectivity, yes or no?
The internal audit function is not only about the preparation of financial statement stage only. It can be there for the overall internal control process or whatever procedures or policies we are having in our entity, whether it is performing efficiently or not.
Yes, let's assume that is one more aspect to their role. Means over and above whatever functions of internal audit are there, as per the policy, in addition to that, they are required to follow this particular step. They are required to do this also. So additional requirement, you can say, additional responsibility of internal audit. So this is an additional responsibility of internal audit. Now tell me whether this supports the objectivity or not.
It supports, sir.
Okay. How? If you can explain?
Because the auditor will not be actually doing the accounts, no, when it will be like another person checking the account balances.
I'm talking here, they are performing. Performing means preparing.
They're preparing the financials, but they are not preparing the accounts of the book. They're not maintaining the books of accounts, no, sir. So it is like two different person doing the work. So it will be more objective.
So,
Okay. Yes.
preparation of financial statement is the responsibility of management. It is their responsibility. They can use their calculation performed by the internal auditor, but they have to make sure that they are correct or not. It is the responsibility of management. Then it's not objective that internal auditor is performing that calculation part for preparation of financial statement.
Absolutely correct. This is a classic example of a conflicting interest, conflicting responsibilities, wherein the responsibilities of the management are being performed by the internal auditor. Internal auditors are not required to perform calculations. No, they can review, but they cannot perform. It is something like that. I am performing and I am auditing my only thing. It's a conflict of interest, conflicting responsibilities. As a result, if there are policies or procedures in an organization which requires internal auditor to perform conflicting responsibilities, in that case, it doesn't support the objectivity. Rather, it does the reverse work. Means internal audit itself is performing the work and then they are auditing themselves of that particular work and they are issuing the report. How can I rely on that? So it becomes like, okay, I am the one who is preparing the calculations. I am the one auditing the calculations internally and I am giving to external audit and asking, okay, review it and rely it. So that is not at all appropriate. Another example I will give you, very best example, and this happens in most of the organization and that's a problem also. There is a policy. Remuneration of internal audit function will be decided by CFO. Now tell me.
So in this case also, appointment and determination of remuneration is the role of the management or a audit committee or nomination remuneration committee which will decide the matter. It's not the any specific managerial level or any one level below of the management or those charged with government who is going to be deciding that remuneration part.
Very good, absolutely correct. here if I talk about CFO and I say that CFO is the one who is deciding the remuneration of the internal audit, then that is not appropriate. Reason because what is happening here, the remuneration will directly impact the work performed by the internal auditor. As a result, it is not appropriate for CFO to decide the remuneration. Rather, this should be something with respect to the management, or you can say should be given to the audit committee. They should be the one who should decide upon who should be the internal auditor, what should be their remuneration, should be their roles and responsibility. Can anyone tell me such a requirement, whether that kind of requirement is there or not? Any such similar requirement do you think in law is there? Anyone? Okay. Good, Vignesh. Yes. Anyone else? Come on, guys. Any similar requirement in the law which is there on similar lines? I'll give you one requirement. Okay, one such requirement which is there. Now, there is a SEBI LODR regulations. Okay, there's a regulation 18.3 in SEBI LODR regulation. There is a regulation 18.3 which has prescribed the role of the audit committee and review of information by the audit committee. Over there is a detailed role and responsibility specified, wherein there is a role to review the adequacy of the internal audit function, including the structure of the internal audit department, staffing, seniority, reporting structure, coverage, frequency, and everything. So such requirements are also present in law to support the organizational structure, policies and procedures which can have a objectivity, which can support the objectivity of the internal auditor. So when I mean that organizational status, relevant policies, procedures support the objectivity, now you have an idea, fair share of idea how they can support the objectivity. Clear? Any doubt with this? Any doubt? Okay. Now the second is level of competency of the internal audit function. That is, I am required to verify. Before I proceed, before I go to using the work of internal auditor, second thing I am required to verify is level of competency of the internal audit function. How will I do that?
Checking the qualifications of the auditor, internal auditor, their expertise.
Anyone? Very good, yes. Anyone else? But Hemant, I need to check the competency before reviewing the work. How will I do that? Yes, good. Very good, Hemant. Yes, correct. Anyone else? So, to understand the competency of the internal audit function, I need to understand few things. Number one, what are the policies for hiring, training, assigning the internal audit to the internal audit engagements? Number two, whether they have enough technical training, proficiency in auditing. Number three, the qualification or the required knowledge they possess, okay, with respect to the auditing, financial reporting framework, industries specific knowledge, okay, and the knowledge regarding the risk within the organization. Fourth, are they members of any relevant professional bodies, for example, institute? If yes, then are they complying with the professional standards, or are they complying with the continuing professional development requirement of that institute, okay, of that professional body? So it should be like, if they are member of institute, they should be member in good standing, okay, they should be complying with the CPE requirements. If they are member of some other professional body, over there also they should be complying with the professional standards which are there, CPE requirements which are there, they should be member in good standing, okay, all that stuff that should be there. And the last part is the size of the internal audit function in an organization. For example, I have a company of 10 which has a revenue of 10,000 crores, and the internal audit function consists of only 3 people. Can I say they are of such size, the function is of such size that they can perform the work which I can rely? In an area, 1 or 2 area, might be, because 3 people at least can perform something, but not in all the areas. And accordingly, the size of the internal audit function plays an important role to understand the competency of the internal audit function. So this is how I will understand the competency of the internal audit function. Third part is systematic and disciplined approach. What do you mean by that? Can anyone tell me what is systematic and disciplined approach? What I am required to check in this one? What I am required to check in this one? Systematic and disciplined approach. Come on, guys. What I am required to check in this particular area? Anyone? Okay. So, in case of systematic and disciplined approach, okay, for the quality of the audit, here I am required to verify basically how they are performing the audit. Simple, in other terms, quality control that we understood. Okay, the quality that they are maintaining while doing the audit. For example, whether they are following any such quality control standard. Number 2, how they are documenting their work. Number 3, whether they are following the approach which is disciplined. Discipline means more suitable to that environment. For example, I'm just doing only inquiry, no testing at all. And on the basis of inquiry, I conclude my testing. I conclude the opinion on the areas. I will not call it a disciplined approach, because that is not appropriate in that environment. Okay, so when I talk about disciplined approach, that means I am following such kind of approach for the testing, for the evaluation of the internal controls, or for the evaluation of the area which is suitable in that environment particularly. By just doing only inquiry, by just doing only analytics, I cannot get a comfort on the areas. I can get comfort on certain areas which might be, where the analytics is possible, or where the inquiry is sufficient, alone, but not in all areas. So that's where I need to understand what approach they are following, whether that is disciplined or systematic, how they are documenting, and what quality control procedures they are following. By this way, I will be evaluating the internal audit function first. And if anywhere I get answer is no, if I get an answer as a no to these three things, okay, if external auditor doesn't or does not able to get positive evaluation, then do not rely on work of IA. Simple. If I'm not able to get positive evaluation of these three or any of these three, I will not rely upon the work of internal auditor. Clear? Any doubt? Okay, now we understood, okay, we need to evaluate the work of internal auditor. Perfectly fine. We will evaluate the internal audit function first, and then we will decide which areas, okay, and to what extent. Now we need to understand which areas, like, under which areas we can rely upon the work of internal auditor. Okay, for which areas we need to rely upon the work of internal auditor. Now, if I talk about areas, there is no direct list of areas given. So if I talk about, okay, these are the XYZ areas, here you need to rely upon the work of internal audit, answer is no. There is no direct, rather there is a negative list where I am not supposed to rely upon the work of internal audit. Can anyone tell me, like, which are the areas you think, okay, can be, in the negative list where I should not be relying the work of internal audit? Anyone? That you think, okay, this can be a part of the negative list?
Revenue
Okay,
and
revenue.
estimations or any other estimations included matters, which includes management estimates.
Yes, very good. Very good. Anyone else? You think, this will be part of the negative list? This should be part of the negative list.
Any risk assessed and that area pertaining to risk assessed area where they feel there is a risk.
Okay. Anyone else?
If as per auditor's judgment, he is at the time of risk assessment, if he is getting any area where the risk of material misstatement can be high or materiality level can be high, in that case also he cannot use the work of internal auditor, or in assessing the internal audit function and management understanding also he cannot use the internal auditor's opinion directly.
Okay. Good. Very good. Yes. So, yes, absolutely correctly said that I need to understand the areas where, I can say, okay, these are the red flag areas. And when I say red flag areas, as an auditor, I am required to check myself the red flag areas. I will not delegate the work to someone else, or I would rather not rely upon the work that is performed by someone else. So, if in a particular area, if I talk about areas in which, I should not be relying the work of internal auditor, like a negative list area, Over there, the first one is where there are significant professional judgment involved. Now, significant professional judgment means over there the judgment is involved. Now, when I talk about judgment, that judgment should be taken by the external auditor, not the internal auditor. That's why I'm not assigning this area, or I'm not relying upon the area or the work performed by the internal auditor in that area. Because when I talk about the judgment, that judgment should be of external auditor. And if I rely the work of internal auditor in that area, it becomes a judgment based on, or the testing based on the judgment of internal auditor. That is not appropriate. Okay. Which may be planning, performing the audit, evaluating the audit evidence at any point in time. If the more judgment is involved, significant professional judgment is involved, I will not at all rely upon the work of internal auditor. Second, areas which are a higher risk of material misstatement, where the assessed risk, as per SA 315, where the assessed risk of material misstatement is higher. If the assessed risk at the material misstatement, if the assessed risk of the material misstatement is higher, then I may perform procedures directly. I will not rely upon the work of internal auditor. Because the reason is, these are the areas where there is a chance of a fraud risk. These are the areas where there is a higher significant risk. Okay, now if there is significant risk, higher risk of material misstatement, in that case my judgment or my audit plan would require me to get more audit evidence. Okay, higher the risk, higher the evidence I need. If higher the evidence I need, then I need to test myself for that particular area rather than allowing someone else to test and then to rely on that particular area. Okay, so it would not be appropriate for me as an external auditor to rely upon the work of internal auditor on the areas where there is a high risk of material misstatement. And significant risk areas, or when I say high risk areas, you can also say significant risk areas. You can say areas where there is a fraud risk requires special audit consideration. Special audit consideration. Now again the question goes to the whether the internal auditor is equipped enough with the knowledge of special audit consideration. Like, do they know how to audit fraud risk? Do they know how to audit significant risk? We know because we are external auditors. We know that we are going to issue our opinion. It is our responsibility. That's why you should not use the work of internal auditors in these areas. Or areas where you think the organizational structure, policies, procedures does not support the objectivity. Organizational status, relevant policies, procedures support less the objectivity of the internal audit, or the competency of internal audit is lower in that particular area. You should not rely upon the work of internal audit in those cases. And at the end, after doing each and everything, okay, I need to assess that whatever reliance I will place, after reliance on the work of internal auditor, whether the audit evidence obtained is sufficient and appropriate for the purpose of expression of opinion. Okay, so at the end I need to evaluate whether the audit evidence obtained is appropriate and sufficient for the purpose of expression of opinion or not. If not, then perform additional procedures. Just don't rely upon the work performed by the internal auditor. Clear? Any doubt with respect to this one?
Sir,
Yes.
if we assess that the audit evidence is not appropriate for our purpose, then you said that additional procedures has to be performed. These additional procedures have to be performed by the external auditor himself, na? He cannot delegate that things to the internal auditor.
See, at the first stage when we relied upon the work performed by internal auditor and we concluded that okay, the evidence is not appropriate, means internal audit has already performed something. Now it's our time to perform as an external auditor additional procedures. I will not go again to the internal auditor and say no, revise the procedure. If that is feasible, subject to other conditions and everything, I would ask them. But again, that would raise a question on the competency of the internal auditor. Why a revision was required? Clear? Any doubt? Okay, if no doubt, can someone tell me the responsibility? And the question is, what is the responsibility of external auditor with respect to communication to those charged with governance when using work of internal auditor? What is the responsibility of external auditor with respect to communication to those charged with governance?
External auditor have to communicate with those charged with governance about that he has decided to use the work of internal auditor, and he will also discuss about the areas and the scope where he has taken that reliance of that internal auditor.
Very good, absolutely correct. Yes. Remember when we were discussing SA 260, okay, over there we discussed, okay, these are the areas where as an auditor we are required to communicate with those charged with governance, okay, with respect to significant areas when how we are going to perform the audit procedures, plan, scope and approach and everything. We discussed a lot of things in that case. Remember, in that we also discussed this particular part, that okay, if we are going to perform the audit, we are required to provide them the overview of the planned approach. I'll just go back to the notes of SA 260, this particular part, overview of planned approach, and I will write over here including using work of internal auditor. So if I'm using the work of internal auditor, overview of the planned approach requires me to give information to those charged with governance that okay, how I am going to use the work of internal auditor over here. Clear? So overview of planned approach will also include the using the work of internal auditor, and I will refer here SA 610. Now I'll go back.
SA 260 also.
Sorry. Yeah, this is SA 260 only. Yeah. SA 260, communication to those charged with governance. In that I am providing reference to SA 610, and in SA 610 I will be providing reference to SA 260, and over there communication of planned approach, including using the work of IA, and I need to provide the area and the extent of that particular, how much I will be relying upon the work of internal auditor. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt? This is kind of, I'm relying relying on the work which is performed by the internal auditor. Okay. Again, as I told you that, there are certain things, there are certain areas where I should not be relying upon the work of internal auditor. One, judgment involved, high risk of material misstatement, organizational status, level of competence is low. Okay, and finally, if I'm relying how the work was performed, planned, performed, supervised, reviews, documented, whether sufficient and appropriate audit evidence was obtained, reasonable conclusions were drawn, conclusions reached were appropriate or not, all these things I'm required to review, then only I can rely upon the work of internal auditor. Okay. Now that was the part 1 where we referred to the relying upon the work performed by the internal auditor, the first part. Now the second part was direct assistance part. Okay, this is something that is to what extent and to in which area that is done. Okay, the second part is direct assistance part that we need to understand. So what we do is, let's take a quick 10-minute break. After the break, we'll start with the second part of the direct assistance. Okay, let's take a quick 10-minute break. Ashok ji. Thank you, sir. Everyone, welcome back. Let's continue the session. So we discussed the first two parts that we in the start we discussed, like one, in which area, to what extent we can rely upon the work of internal audit. Second, whether the work is adequate or not. Okay, so that is done. Now we will discuss about when we are required to use the work of internal audit as a direct assistance. So rather than we are just relying upon the work of internal audit, we are using the work in the form of direct assistance. In that case, how to direct, supervise, review the work of internal audit, and what are the things that we should ensure before using a direct assistance from the internal audit. Okay, so first the question comes is, if we are saying yes to the direct assistance, if we are saying yes to the direct assistance, then what are the things that as an internal auditor or as an external auditor we are required to review? If yes to direct assistance, then the prime and important thing we are required to verify is threat to the objectivity of the internal auditor. Threat to the objectivity of the internal auditor. Now why? Reason, because when we are using the work of internal auditor, we are reviewing the objectivity to ensure that the work is performed independent, or might not be independent but objectively. Here I am using the direct assistance mode. Over there I need to ensure whether the work that is I'm entrusting to the internal audit, whether I'm giving to the internal audit, whether they can perform that particular work objectively or not. Okay, so is there any threat to objectivity? And the level of competency is enough so that I can I can entrust my work with them, plus level of competency of internal auditor is sufficient and appropriate. Okay, so objectivity and competency, these are the two things that I need to verify. The same way I verified when I was relying upon the work of internal auditor, on the similar lines I am required to check in the case of direct assistance also. Third, prohibition by law. In some cases there could be a prohibition by law. Is there any? So I need to just check, is there any prohibition by law or regulation from obtaining direct assistance? If there is no prohibition, then I will go. If there is a prohibition, if their level of competency is not enough, if there is a threat to objectivity, if any of the answer to any of the question is no, if the answer to any of these questions or factors is negative, then do not obtain direct assistance. Simple. Unless and until the answer to these factors is yes, do not obtain direct assistance. Now let's say answer is yes to these particular factors. There is no issue. I can use the work of internal auditor. I can obtain direct assistance from them. Now the question comes is, I need to determine the nature and the extent of the work that can be assigned to internal auditors. So, how to determine the nature and extent of work that can be assigned to internal auditors for providing direct assistance. Okay, how will you determine the nature and extent of the work? Can someone give me some examples? What factors I will consider when I will determine the nature and extent of the work that is required to be given to IA for obtaining direct assistance or for providing direct assistance? So how will I determine, on what factors I will determine the nature and extent? So if I talk about factors, which are those factors? Anyone? Okay, Jenny. Anyone else? How will I determine that? Come on, quickly.
Based on the analysis that we made at the time of taking decision whether we can use his direct assistance or not, we are with the information about his objectivity and his competence of the performing any process that is relevant for my audit purpose. If the area is such a importance that I cannot delegate it to the internal auditor, rather I will decide as per my professional judgment that I should perform it at my end personally. In that case, I would not use his direct assistance. It's a judgment area.
Yes, very good. Absolutely correct. So I need to again go back the way I decided the areas in case of relying upon the work of internal auditor. Same way, on the similar lines, there is a negative list which gives me to what extent in which areas I should not be using the direct assistance. Okay, if I talk about that negative list basically is areas involving significant judgments. Number one, the way it was there in case of relying upon the work on the similar lines, areas involving significant judgment, areas of assessed risk of higher assessed risk of material misstatement, where then if there is a area where the work has been related to the IA. For example, you can say that the IA has performed that particular work, or they were involved in performing that particular work, or they were somehow linked to that work. To avoid the self-review threat, I will not use or I will not obtain direct assistance from IA in that area. Okay. And the fourth, very important and very basic, is decision regarding the use of IA in SWOP. So I would not involve IA in deciding how much I should rely upon the IA. Means that decision should be of external auditors, not any factor or any influence from internal auditor should not be there. Okay. So the fourth point is decision regarding the use of internal audit and its work should only be decided by external audit. That external audit should only decide the extent and area of direct assistance. It should not be the case that, okay, I'm going to internal audit and I'm saying, okay, tell me where you can provide me direct assistance, in which areas you can provide me direct assistance. They will list down the areas of my direct assistance in this area. I'm fine with that. No, that should be the decision of the external auditor in which area, and identification should be done by the external auditor, not the internal auditor. So in which areas is a negative list. These are on a similar lines which we saw in the reliance of the work of IA. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt? Now the second part is to what extent here. Very important. Okay, to what extent I need to use the direct assistance. Now the extent is directly linked with, you can say that the amount of planning that is required in that particular area, performance that is in that particular area. In that case, then how much audit evidence is required to be gathered in that area. And again, threat to objectivity, assess risk of material misstatement, all these things. Okay, all these things determine to what extent. If you ask me, is there any straightforward way to answer that to what extent? Answer is no. It is a professional judgment. To what extent is a professional judgment. That is based on your planning, performing the work, your evaluating the audit evidence, the extent to which the audit evidence is required, assess the risk of material misstatement in that particular area, threat to objectivity if any, and the level of confidence of the IA function. Based on that, I will evaluate to what extent I need to use the direct assistance, but in which area. So there is a negative list, direct negative list. I need to follow this negative list. Vignesh, direct assistance means I will ask internal auditor or internal audit team or function to do the work as I say. For example, I want to test certain invoices. I will go and internal audit, okay, internal audit provide me direct assistance, means that test these invoices for me the way I want, document the way I want, I will review your work and then I will rely upon your work. So that is the direct assistance, that they are assisting us in the audit. Clear? Any doubt in which areas to what extent in case of direct assistance? Any doubt? Do you, okay, now if no further doubts, now tell me one thing. In practical, do you think it is possible I go to internal audit function and I ask them, okay, test this for me, provide me direct assistance, and they will agree to that?
Generally, they would not.
Why so?
Because they have their own practice of working, their own way of deciding what to do and not to do. That's why they have their own judgment about what should be done or what shall not be done. They will be conflicting with our procedures. They may say that no, this is not required.
So usually internal auditor is appointed by management or that is company. If external auditor, I will ask him to do something, he will not respond positively to me, sir. This is that.
Now, absolutely, correctly pointed out that internal auditors are the part of the organization. They work as per the instructions of either audit committee or management based on their organizational status. I am the external auditor. I will go to them, okay, I will say, okay, test these 3 areas for me. 99% they will say no. And the reason for the same is we are not, approaching them correctly, or rather they are not our, like someone who is appointed by us as an auditor. Like, they are not appointed by the external auditors. They are appointed, they are hired, they are working for the management, and till the time this requirement doesn't come from management, they will not act upon. Obviously, till the time management doesn't say, okay, internal audit function, help external auditor, they will not act upon. And that's why it is necessary and practically also, required that you have a written agreement with the management which areas will be tested by the internal audit team. So management should, have a written agreement with the auditors. Like, if as required by Ch3, we are required to communicate our approach, but beyond approach, beyond approach, there should be a written agreement with the management. Okay, management, this is the area that we are planning. Okay, that internal audit, like, do you agree to this particular part? If they will agree, they will sign the agreement. If they will not agree, they might not sign the agreement. They might not say, okay, we are not good with that. So for that, you need to have a written agreement with the management. To decide which area, to what extent, management, you need to have a written agreement with the management. So I'll highlight this part, very important, without which you cannot even, ask internal audit function to work for you. They will never do it.
So, does it amount to taking permission of the management for using such kind of direct assistance?
Yes, it is kind of, asking management, okay, management, give me a permission that, that internal audit function should perform this task for me. Unless and until you don't have a written agreement, they will not perform. Plus, I will make sure in agreement that it is written that entity will not intervene in work to be performed by IA. Entity means the company. Reason, because let's say, for example, tomorrow I am giving some task to the internal audit where I have a written agreement with the management. Now management says, okay, goes to the internal audit and says, no, don't test like this. Do not test this area and test only these 3 areas. I initially as an external auditor gave 4 areas, but later on management went and said, okay, to internal audit, no, test only 3 areas. That is the intervention by the management, by the entity in the work that is required to be performed by IA, and that will impact the quality, the objectivity of the work. And I don't want that. As an auditor, that is something I won't be, interested in having that. So as a result, it is very, very important to have a written agreement wherein it is said that, okay, management, you will not intervene in the work to be performed by IA. Straightforward. Now there are certain other parts also of this particular agreement. Second part is confidentiality. Whatever testing will be performed by IA, internal audit, that testing data will be kept confidential, and that audit file will become part of the audit documentation and the property of the auditor. Okay, not of the management. It should not happen. Okay, management says that no, this is testing done by the internal audit, this is part of the management documentation, I will not give you the documentation. No, that shouldn't be the case. And third is, if there is any pressure or something which is being applied by the management which is impacting the objectivity of the auditor, in such a case it will become the responsibility of the internal auditor to inform the external auditor about such threat to objectivity. So external auditor is required to be updated by the internal audit team that okay, there is a threat to objectivity, and accordingly please look into this. Means management is asking me to not to do this or not to do testing in this way, but to do testing in this way. This is a threat to objectivity. As a result, I would request external auditor to look into this matter and tell me what to do if there is something happening like this. So these 3 points should be part of your agreement, written agreement with the management.
Sir?
Yes.
In case I decide to take direct assistance of internal auditor, can external auditor ask for the working paper for the procedure that was originally asked by the external auditor and that have been performed by the internal auditor for his own documentation purpose?
Sorry, can you repeat your question again?
If anything or procedure has been performed by internal auditor on the request of external auditor, in case he is taking direct assistance, and while performing that procedure, whatever the documentation procedure or working paper was maintained by internal auditor, will it be considered as property of external auditor and can be shared by the internal auditor for his own audit documentation?
See, now that audit documentation is part of audit documentation of external auditor, not of internal auditor. And that is a property of external auditor. That totally depends upon the external auditor whether to share with the internal auditor or not. Usually what happens is, there is, if something is being tested by the internal auditor, okay, that audit documentation goes to external auditor verifies it, reviews it, makes any changes, anything, if they require based on their standards and that particular part, and then they make that particular amended documentation as a part of their audit working file. Now whether internal auditor can ask them, yes, they can ask them, okay, please provide us, they can request them to provide the documentation, but in the most of the cases external auditors does not share this particular information or the amended audit documentation with the internal auditor, because that is audit property, and from XYZ reasons, confidentiality, internal assessment, and lot of things are there. Based on that, they do not prefer to share that documentation with the internal audit team. So I hope I have answered your question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is should be done as an additional requirement. That is a written agreement. You can say this an additional requirement for direct assistance. Written agreement should be there. Otherwise, it will be a problem. Clear? Any doubt till now? Any doubt? And at the end, whatever we decide, whatever we do, there are two important standards that we need to follow for all the stuff that we are doing. Okay. For all the things that we are doing, there are two important standards that we should refer to every time. Can anyone tell me those standards? Those two standards that will apply to the work that is also performed by the internal audit team in case of direct assistance. Very important part. 610, it's there. It's 610 only. Apart from 610, two important standards. Yes.
As we already discussed about the principal auditor and another auditor case, in that case also it can be a situation where they can be relying or taking any assistance from the internal auditor. In that case also it can be used.
See, in if that area is a, when it comes to the relying upon the work of another auditor, okay, at the end the responsibility lies with the principal auditor. I personally feel that area is of more significant judgment, and I will not delegate that area to the internal audit for the direct assistance. That goes into your negative list, so that will never come to the direct assistance part. Apart from that, which are the two standards which by default will be will be applied to the work that is performed by the internal audit in case of direct assistance? So come on quickly, two important standards that will be applicable. No Ginny, no Hemant. Which are those standards? So those standards are somewhere similar to the Ginny, somewhere similar to your answer, that is SA 220, quality in case of audit of a financial statement. So that standard is also required to be followed by the internal audit function when we are using the direct assistance, because they are also required to maintain the quality. Plus SA 230, audit documentation. So they are also required to follow the documentation requirement. Plus SA 610 also has the documentation requirement. 220 and 230 both are required to be followed in case of direct assistance by default. Very important, directly applicable. By default, that is required to be followed. Quality and documentation. These two important things are required to be followed in case of direct assistance. Clear? Any doubt? Okay, that was your standard SA 610. Let's go to the study material and just have a quick review of the standard in the study material. So page number 3.24, over there you have a 4.5.2 SA 610. Then you have a particular first part where it says that the external auditor has a sole responsibility of the audit opinion. As I already discussed, it will not reduce the responsibility of the auditor in expressing the opinion. We can use the work of internal audit, but we cannot refer the work. Okay, either we can rely upon, use the work of internal audit, or we can ask them to provide direct assistance on the engagement. By any way, it will not reduce the work of, or not reduce the responsibility of the external auditor. Okay, so use the work or direct assistance, these are the two methods. Now remember, I divided the standard in three parts. One, like determine whether the internal audit function direct assistance can be used. Second, whether the work which is we are using for the internal audit function is adequate. And the third part is that how we can we can direct, supervise or review their work. First one is the extent or the areas in which we can use the work, Number 2, adequacy, and the third is direct supervision and review of the work. So they have given the definition of the direct assistance and the internal audit function, that is fine. Then you have a objective and scope of the internal audit function, just a understanding which is given. Then evaluation of the internal audit function that we understood, organizational status, objectivity, policies and procedures, okay. Then level of competency, whether internal audit function applies discipline and systematic approach, including quality control. If any of the answer is no to this particular part, then external auditor shall not use the work of internal audit function when this is do not adequately support, lacks sufficient competency, or does not apply a systematic approach. Then determining the nature and extent, again the areas where like a negative list be discussed one. So all significant judgment involving more judgment, planning, performing or evaluating at any point in time, higher risk of material misstatement, lesser internal audit function status or objectivity, lower the competence. Then communication, SA 260 that we discussed, using the work, then coordination with the internal audit function, read the reports, performing the procedures, whether the work is adequate or not, that particular part is there. Then determining whether we can use the direct assistance or not, okay. Again we need to check prohibited by law or not, whether it is prohibited by law, whether there is any threat to objectivity. So I need to assess these areas and then only I can decide whether to use direct assistance or not. Then as I said, again I will go and evaluate the audit, internal audit's organizational status. Then again division of the division of responsibility to identify threat to compliance. I will not use the work of internal audit in direct assistance when there is a threat to objectivity or they lack sufficient competence to perform the proposed work. Again, a good example, a chart is given, very good. I would mark as an important. So whatever we discussed, summarized in a chart form. Then you need to review the work that is performed by the internal audit, and again the quality control is applicable, SA 220 in that scenario that we discussed, okay. And this is SA 610. Any doubt till now? Any doubt? Yes, Pooja.
Sir, in case we decided to use the work of internal auditor, in that case we have to communicate with them which areas we are going to use the work that have been performed by the internal auditor, and in that case we can also read the audit reports that have been given by them. In case the internal auditor says that as you discussed so many or so and so areas that you are going to use for my work, and he is providing that only that relevant part of the audit report, not full-fledged audit report he is giving to me. In that case, can I ask him for the full-fledged audit report or only the work where we are using his work?
So usually what happens is, first of all, I take all the data and then I say them, okay, these are the areas I'm going to rely on. So the question on, whether they will provide me half data or they will not give me the data doesn't come up by this way. What I do is, I ask them, okay, give me all your reports, give me the observations you have identified, give me the details of the audit that you have performed during the year. Okay, once I get that data, because that particular data is very important for your risk assessment. At the time of risk assessment, when I use, when I will be performing understanding of the business and entity as per SA 315, I'll be taking up all that data. Now, once I have the data, I'll go through the data, I'll do the risk assessment, I'll decide, okay, these 3 areas I'll rely upon. Rest of the areas I don't rely upon. So I'll communicate to them, okay, these 3 areas I'm going to rely, that's it. So the question on, not sharing the data doesn't come up in this way.
Okay, sir. Clear.
Any other doubt, guys? See, practically what happens is, I'll tell you practical scenario. So whenever we start the audit, we have multiple meetings with the management to understand the business and entity, the industry structure, organizational structure, a lot of things. And we usually share a data requirement list. Some people say the PBC, or some people say IDR, some people say data requirement list, or whatever. Different nomenclatures are there. So once we share that list has a list of, that list is a kind of a list of documents that we need for our risk assessment and understanding the entity. That includes, if there is an internal audit function, then the organizational status, like organizational structure, to whom they report, then the audits during the year performed by them, audit reports, observations identified, and one very important part is, out of the observations identified, observations reported to the audit committee or to those charged with governance, to understand that, okay, during the year they identified 10 observations, but they only reported 2 observations out of the 10 to those charged with governance. They did not report 8 observations. Why? Whether they were not material enough, whether they were not significant enough, or there is something else, or they were rectified, whatever reason. So we ask this per detail from the management. Once we get the detail, we perform the risk assessment, and at that point in time, we prepare the audit plan. Like, when we discuss the audit plan also, I'll just go back on the top. So this is your overall audit strategy. Now, if you see overall audit strategy, just a minute, I'll show you in the overall audit strategy also, that we discussed that, areas there we will be using the work of internal auditor or any audit expert, okay, over here. Like whether there are any other expected communications with third parties, including the internal audit functions, okay, and whether we will be using the work of internal auditor or not. So this is part of your overall audit strategy. On the basis of that, you prepare your audit plan. So at the time of preparing the audit strategy itself, we decide these particular details by gathering the information, and then on the basis of that, we decide what areas to test, or what areas to rely upon of internal audit. Clear? Any doubt? So that was your SA 610. Okay. If no further doubts, then can we take some questions on this particular topic? Okay, let's take some questions on this particular topic. Remember a question we were discussing where on the SA 600 topic, that Sudha and Associates and Shubham and Company. The same question is there, but there is one more additional information in that question. That is, SPL also appointed borderline advisories as their internal auditors. Borderline advisories internal audit team comprised of individuals who held diploma in internal audit from New World University. However, none of them were chartered accountants or member of institute. Okay, this is the information of the same question. The question was Super Products Limited and TTL, that is the subsidiary. We were discussing the questions on SA 600 on that part. But in that question, there is one more information that I did not discuss purposefully, because that was related to internal audit. Now that is that for the Super Products Limited, there is an internal audit consulting firm which is appointed, that is the Borderline Advisories, BLA. BLA team comprised of individuals who held diploma in internal audit from New World University. However, none of them were chartered accountants or member of institute. Okay, this is the information. Now let's see, based on information, what the question is. So to continue, in continuation of that, this is the additional information. SPL appointed borderline advisories as their internal auditors. BLA's internal audit team comprised of individuals who held diploma in internal audit from New World University. However, none of them were chartered accountant or member of institute. Okay. During FY 22-23, BLA chose the following area for the testing, internal control, and design and operating effectiveness. So they decided to test these areas, following areas, for testing the internal controls. Now I'll explain you certain terms over here. Okay. This RA is a risk assessment. This is design efficiency or effectiveness. And this is operating effectiveness of the internal controls. Okay. Now, these are the processes, these are the description of the control, and this is the risk assessment, outcome of the design efficiency, design effectiveness, and the operating effectiveness. Means, when I talk about vendor account reconciliation process, the control says that at the each month's end, the AP team requests vendor statement and performs vendor reconciliation. Differences, if any, are resolved within 7 working days. So the risk is high. Design was appropriate, means design effectiveness was passed, yes, but the operating effectiveness is not passed, means the control is not operating effectively. Okay, so this is the detail given in the question. I just give you 2 minutes, read these details, the processes and the description, just an overview, just a glimpse of the particular, process and control and the RA, DE and OE part. Have a read in 2 minutes, glimpse, so that we can move to the question. Okay. Now let's move to the question. Just have an overview, not more than that. Now going to the question. Assuming that SPL also hired BLA to assist management in calculating the impact of the following areas. So BLA was also hired for calculating the impact by the management in the following areas. That is the first time adoption of Ind AS 116. Identification and initial recognition of transaction falling within the scope of Ind AS 109. Calculation of fair value of liabilities as per Ind AS 113. Okay, so management also hired them to calculate the impact of these areas. Instead of providing fees to BLA, okay, SPL issued equity shares at the price lower than the market value with a lock-in period of 1 year on it. Kindly guide Ch3 and Associate when they intend to rely on the work performed by internal auditor for the purpose of audit. Also provide factors which can affect the internal auditor's objectivity. Now, you just had a glimpse of the areas which were tested by the internal audit team. This is the additional information with respect to the for the areas where the internal audit team was hired to calculate the impact, how they were paid. Now, based on that, tell me whether Ch3 and Associate can rely upon the work performed by internal auditors. If yes, then why? If no, then why? Come on, guys.
First point where we start with is the professional competence. As the question says that the person they are independent or internal auditor are not the member of institute. They are having just a diploma degree in internal audit from a university, which is not the appropriate person actually for the post of the internal audit. It can be appropriate as per the management decision or their review, but it's not that much having expertise for taking decisions related to application of India's, and these are the material areas. And also the assessment they have taken, most of the time they are saying that their three areas are having higher risk. We are also having doubt on their expertise, also on their competence level, so we cannot use their work. And one more thing is there, that instead of paying their fees, they are issuing them the equity shares. There can be conflict of interest, objectivity or independence question, so that we cannot use the work, or neither we can take direct assistance from him.
Good, very good. Any other answer to this? Anyone has a different answer or something to add? Anyone? Yes, absolutely correct. Now here, the members of the internal audit team are, none of them are chartered accountants. Number one. Number two, here management has hired them to calculate the impact on the following areas on the financial statement. Means they are involved in conflicting responsibilities. Remember, we discussed about conflicting responsibilities. So
Yes,
they are
sir.
hired for conflicting responsibilities. Number three, they are being paid in equity shares, which is at a price lower than the market value with lock-in period of 1 year on it. As a result, there is a threat to the independence, there is a threat to the objectivity and competency. In that case, my first thing, evaluation of the internal audit function. Over there, if I identify that there is low level of competence, there is low level of objectivity, okay, in that case, I cannot rely, I should not use the work of internal auditor, and I should not obtain direct assistance from them. So in this case, Sudha and Associate should not use the work of internal auditors. Clear with this one? Any doubt? Pretty straightforward. Details are given. On the basis of details, I am saying low competency, low objectivity, issues on the independence, I cannot rely upon, I cannot use the work of internal auditor. Direct. Okay. Let's move to the next question. It is basically a descriptive one, but very good. So the question says that a high level of competence of the internal audit function can compensate for organizational status, policies and procedures that do not adequately support the objectivity of internal auditors, or for the external auditors who intend to rely on the work performed by internal auditor. You need to comment on this statement. So the statement is, high level of competency compensate for an organizational status or policies and procedures that do not adequately support for the objectivity. You need to comment on this. Come on. What do you think of this? First of all, tell me whether this statement is correct or not.
No, sir.
Okay, and the reason?
Because they are saying that only the level of competence can decide the adequacy. We can compensate for even if the procedures are not having that much objectivity for the internal audit function.
Okay, good. Very good. Anyone with a different answer?
There should be competence also, and plus there should be policies and procedure that supports the objectivity of internal audit function. Both should be there. Either of one shall not be missing. And we cannot say that only level of competence can compensate for the other thing.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. When we discussed the points, it was not or like competency or objectivity. No, we discussed that competency and objectivity. So when I talk about competency and objectivity, it is something that basically it's not like that. Okay, either or. They should both adequately support. They should both they should be both present. If one of the thing is not present, I cannot say that the other will compensate. No, it is not possible. Competency cannot compensate objectivity. Objectivity cannot compensate competency. It is not at all possible. Another question linked to this one is, as an external auditor, when I'm going to, let's say for example, use the work of internal audit, I will check competency and objectivity. Okay. So tell me, am I required to check competency and objectivity as on 31st March at the end of reporting period? Am I required to check competency when I'm obtaining the work, like as on date, let's say today, if I'm, let's say on 31st of May, okay, if I'm, relying upon the work of internal audit, as on 31st of May, whether internal audit is competent and, objective, or as on the date of signing of audit report, at which date I'm required to check the competency and objectivity.
Objectivity and competency should be present right from the appointment or the starting period of my relevant audit period. Throughout the period that I'm checking under the audit.
Okay. Anyone else with a
That
different
should
answer?
be present there right from his appointment date.
Yes, good, very good. Anyone else with a different answer? No? Okay. So when I talk about the period, so I will bifurcate in two scenarios. Number one, when I use the work or when I provide the direct assistance or when I obtain the direct assistance. When I'm using the work, it should be during financial year, okay, or when the work was performed. Basically, let's say when I'm using the work of internal audit, so whenever the internal audit performed the work, at that point in time, whether they were competent and objective enough, basically throughout the financial year, because they will be performing work throughout the financial year. So at that particular point in time, whether they were competent and objective enough, that is one thing. When I'm using the direct assistance, I'm not using the work of internal audit. At the time of direct assistance, I will be verifying the objectivity and competency of the internal audit. It doesn't matter what their status was last year. No, because they are helping me now, they are assisting me now at this point in time, whatever month it is after the financial year close, when I'm doing the audit, at this point in time or during my audit, when I'll start the audit and I will conclude the audit, at that point in time, whether they are competent and objective. So based on the type of method I choose, I need to check the competency and objectivity of the internal audit. Clear? And as I said, like, during the financial year or at the time of direct assistance. So this is not a one instance that, okay, I verified, done and dusted, close. No, that is continuous. Okay, continuous process that I need to follow. Means when I'm assigning the work for the direct assistants, when they are performing the work, when they are giving me the output, when I'm reviewing, when I'm finalizing, during the whole particular phase, I need to review the objectivity and competency. Plus, during the whole financial year, I need to review. Even when I'm planning, executing, or anything, any information comes up to me, I need to revisit the objectivity and continuity evaluation that I performed. So it is not a process. It is not something which is performed at one particular point in time. No, it is a continuous process kind of thing. So objectivity and competency may be reviewed as a continuum. Means we are required to look continuously to that particular part. And one particular element cannot compensate for the lack of another element. So objectivity of the internal auditor cannot compensate for the lack of sufficient competency. In the same way, lack of your competency cannot be compensated by the objectivity, or vice versa, both of the scenarios. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt? Okay, if no doubt, let's see one more question before we proceed to the next topic. So the question is, Sudha and Associate decided to use the work of internal audit over design effectiveness and operating effectiveness of manual journal entries. As per the information gathered, BLA tested 50 samples of manual journal entries and found no deviation in any attribute. Hence, Sudha and Associate decided not to perform further testing on manual journal entries, and internal audit has already performed sufficient testing on them. Now let's go back to the above table. Over there you have a manual journal entries process, which says that all manual journal entries above a predefined threshold are reviewed and approved by 2 independent reviewers in the manual journal entry approval tool with the documentation. Once approved, the manual journal entry is auto-posted into the ERP without any manual intervention. The risk is high, design is passed, and operating effectiveness is also passed. So here BLA tested something, 50 samples. Okay, BLA tested 50 samples of manual journal entry and found no deviation. So Sudha and Associate decided not to perform further testing on MJE, just to use the testing which is performed by them. Now you tell me whether Sudha and Associate are correct with this approach. Come on guys.
So as we discussed earlier also, there are 3 points which we have on the basis of which we decided that we will not use their work or any assistance from them. So in this present case also it's not proper.
Let's assume we have competency, organizational status, and discipline approach. So evaluation is fine. Let's assume evaluation is fine. Evaluation of internal audit is fine. Okay. Now tell me whether the approach whether the approach of Sudha and Associate is appropriate or not. I am saying for a time being, ignore the organizational status, competency, and all that stuff. Assume that is perfectly fine.
First of all, he should look into the procedure, why they are taking that 50 samples only, the choosing process of that sample size, on which basis they have taken that sample, the procedure that way they have performed, whether it was perfect or not, or in that case, if all the procedures were sufficient and appropriate as per the opinion of the Sudha and Associates, then he can use their work.
Okay. Good. Any other answers to this?
And so one more thing I will say, I'm not sure whether it should come there in the answer. The manual journal entries are one area where management can have internal control overlapping that we discussed. There can be a fraud can be committed by the management. So this can be a major part which should be done himself by the external auditor. It should not be taken as using that work that have been done by the internal auditor. So in this case also you should not have done this.
Absolutely correct. Wonderful. Now, when I talk about manual journal entries, remember SA 240 we discussed management override of controls. Over there we discussed that it is a presumed risk, fraud risk. When I say fraud risk, they are the higher risk of higher assessed risk of material misstatement plus fraud risk. Over there, remember we discussed that irrespective of the auditor's assessment of the area, auditor is required to test. Remember something that we discussed when we were discussing that particular part? I have that notes open. I'll just go back to that. Presumed risk of fraud. Remember, this was the one, and one part we discussed was management override of controls. Over there, we assumed, we discussed that irrespective of the auditor's assessment of the risk, test appropriateness of manual journal entries and other adjustment. Reason because this particular part, presumed risk of fraud, they are the higher assessed risk of material misstatement. So higher assessed risk of material misstatement, or you can call as a significant risk, and fraud risk, plus their presumed risk of fraud. Now if they are presumed risk of fraud, high risk areas, in that case I cannot assign that area, or I cannot use the work of internal audit. I need to test myself because SA 240 says that. Simple. So your answer will not only cover SA 610 but SA 240 also. So first I will say, when I will write the answer, I will refer SA 610, like when I should be, how I should be evaluating the area. Okay, that whether I can use the work of internal audit or not. Then I will refer to SA 240 and I will refer to the management override of controls and significant risk, fraud risk due to fraud. And irrespective of the auditor's assessment, I need to design and perform audit procedures to test the appropriateness of the journal entries. Hence, in the current case, Sudha and Associate did not perform that. They relied upon the work performed by internal audit. That is not appropriate as per SA 610 and SA 240. Clear with this answer? Any doubt? Any doubt? Okay. If no doubt, let's see one last question and then we will proceed to the next topic. The last question is, after performing all the testing and gathering sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, Sudha and associate drafted their opinion and included the below paragraph in the other matter paragraph section of the audit report. This is the other matter paragraph of the audit report. I would request everyone to read this paragraph for a minute and then tell me that whether this is appropriate or not. Read for a minute this particular paragraph and tell me whether this is appropriate or something more should be added to this paragraph. Tell me, come on. And the reason, Hemant? You can unmute and speak also, no issues, in whatever language you are comfortable. Okay. So any specific, okay, so what is the reason behind your answer? Come on guys, what do you think? Should we add something more to this paragraph or this is perfectly fine? Okay. Come on guys. Waiting for your answer. Ginny, Pooja, Usha, Vignesh. No? No answers? Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
in the table that you showed, there was one thing that vendor account reconciliation was there. In that
I'll go
case,
back to
risk
that.
assessment was high.
Yeah.
Design efficiency was, I think, it was also high, and operating efficiency was not there. So
Yes,
there
correct.
major risk related to this parties also. So in that case, it can affect my revenue recognition also. And the point was the same. The persons they are there in audit functions are not the members, so I cannot directly rely on their work.
Okay.
And cannot use their work.
So you are saying because vendor reconciliation failed in the internal audit area, that might affect my revenue recognition and I should not relate over here.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It can affect my conclusions also, na, sir? My audit opinion.
That was internal audit testing. It will not affect till the time you identified any issue. Yes, that will help you in your risk assessment, that when you will draft your audit procedures, you will keep your risk high for that particular area and you will gather more audit evidence by testing more on that particular area. But just because operating effectiveness of the control was not there, I would not say there was a misstatement. Anything else? Anyone else?
They should have performed some more substantial audit procedures also.
Okay, so basically the question is around the drafting of the paragraph, I would say. So this paragraph is there, other matter paragraph. Now what paragraph says that, I'll just read this paragraph and I'll explain you what I want to say, the answer here. The financial statement prepared by the company includes revenue recognition from long-term contracts amounting to 695 crores for financial year 22-23 and 665 crores from financial year 21-22, which were not audited by us, were audited by company's internal auditor. How I am required to refer to the work of internal auditor? I am not required to refer to the work of internal auditor in my audit report. The sole responsibility lies with the external auditor. We have seen this kind of paragraph when we are relying upon the work of another auditor, but not internal auditor. So this particular paragraph, whatever it is written, should not be here. Reason because I cannot refer to the work of internal auditor in my audit report. At the end, it is my sole responsibility to gather audit evidence. It is my responsibility as an external auditor to express an opinion. By putting this kind of paragraph, I'm reducing my responsibility, which should not be the case. And trust me, for this is kind of, I am doing this is gross negligence also, if I do this kind of things. So if I'm referring the work of internal auditor, if I'm relying upon the work of internal auditor, I have to follow SA 610. I have to perform some procedures, but at the end, it is my opinion. I cannot refer this particular work. So this other matter paragraph, incorrect, should not be there. No, not at all. No requirement. You cannot refer the work of internal auditor. Clear? So whenever, other matter paragraph comes, company's internal auditor reference comes, not allowed. Think of that point of view, that you cannot refer the work of internal auditor. Even at the observation level, let's say for example, internal audit in their testing identified the observation. Now, can I directly refer that observation in my basis of opinion, in my basis of qualified opinion? Answer is no, I cannot. I cannot write a qualified opinion, basis of qualified opinion paragraph where I'm referring the work of internal auditor. I have to do my own individual testing, independent testing. Even though if I'm relying upon the work of internal audit, I should be having sufficient audit evidence to provide that opinion of my own. Okay, so this is another matter paragraph, but same is applicable for your qualification also. Clear? Good. So that was your SA 600. We discussed the questions on SA 600. We discussed the questions on SA 610. I hope both of the standards might be crystal clear to you and you will be able to understand now the concepts of both standards easily. Okay. If I go back to the study material, the next thing that we have to discuss the next topic that is there is SA 620, which is using the work of auditor's expert. Okay. Now, considering the time, what I will suggest is I will start this particular topic SA 620 in the next lecture, where I would request everyone to read this particular topic SA 620. Also, apart from SA 620, I would be covering one more standard, that is SA 540, auditing accounting estimates. Okay, so these two standards I will be covering in your next lecture. Clear? Any doubts? Okay, if no further doubts, what I suggest is we keep the session till here. Okay, I will see you in the then next section. Okay, guys. Thank you. Thank you, guys, for your participation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes.